Hello, everybody. Welcome to this last webinar in the Future of Food series. It's my pleasure to welcome you together with Jannet de Jong and Sergio Ooijens from Lely, who are going to talk about the future of farm and sustainable farming. Very interesting topic from our partner, Lely. This webinar is organized as a part of a Rethink Protein Challenge, in which students are trying to come up with a solution to provide a sustainable protein to world population. And Lely is one of the partners. Sergio and Jannet are two of the coaches. And today they are going to talk about the cutting edge research done by Lely. This webinar is being recorded, so you can watch it back. And after the two presentations, we'll have a time for questions from the audience. You can put your questions in the chat anytime, and there will be also some polls, so stay tuned. I think that's it for the introduction. Now I would like to give the floor to Sergio, and enjoy the webinar.
All right, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to present for you all. I cannot see you all, so I hope you can see me well. And for the coming 30 minutes, I will present to you not so much research, but I'll present to you a vision that we as Lely have on the future of farming. It will take half an hour. It's all about innovation, of course, because we are as Lely farming innovators. So after that, Jannet will pick up the presentation also to tell you a little bit more how we look at innovation, specifically about startups. So that's for the coming 45 minutes. My name is Sergio Ooijens. I'm responsible for two things at Lely. First of all, for the marketing and communication, but second of all, also for a project which we call the Orbiter. And the Lely Orbiter, I will tell you a little bit about it a little bit later, is a mini dairy processing installation, which is one of our latest innovations. So for now, our vision on the future of farming, and in that way, we think it's a sustainable way of farming. And if you want to do sustainable way of farming, you have to adapt to a changing society. As we all know, society is growing. The population is growing really fast, and we have to feed all these people in 2050. We have to have a lot of people in the world that need proteins, and therefore the agricultural sector will have to change and adapt. But it's not only adapting on the request of more protein, but also on a request in society that, things have to become, farming has to be done in a different way. So therefore at Lely, we have a vision. And our vision is that we believe in a future in farming which is sustainable, profitable, and enjoyable. And about this vision, I would like to tell you a little bit more today. Now, let's first go to the challenges that our farmers have that we see. So specifically the dairy farmers, which are the customers of Lely. First of all, the biggest challenge is not so much an environmental challenge, but I think one we should start with is that a lot of farmers, if we ask them what is your big challenge, is, can I hand over the farm to the next generation? Each generation, a big task for each farmer is to hand over the farm. That's a big dream for a lot of farmers, but it's getting more and more difficult nowadays. And that's one of their biggest challenges. But of course, there is a challenge which is related to profitability. At this point, the profitability of farmers, worldwide dairy farmers, is always under stress. It's a homogeneous market, which is intrinsically has the fact that you all produce the same product, which has a pricing issue. The price of milk is always pressuring on these farmers. And we've seen that the price of milk hasn't been going up over the last decades, while the costs, of course, with inflation and with all the regulations have gone up drastically. So all the time, the profitability of milk producers is one of their challenges. Now, the second challenge that they have is with the enjoyability. Farming is a hard job, and it has always been. It's a satisfying job, but it's also harsh work. And for farmers, if they want to expand, they have to recruit and retain a workforce to support them. And nowadays, it's more and more difficult to get these people. and also for themselves. With changing society and changing agendas for people. Also, farmers see that a lot of farmers would like to have more time for themselves, their families, and a more balanced work life. Now, and the third, which is of course what we'll be talking mainly about, is what we call the license to operate. We in the Netherlands, but I think this is worldwide, see more and more that society is watching upon what farmers do. There's a more and more pressure on regulation, and for them changing to society is required to at least keep their license to operate, to be sure that you can continue farming and therefore hand over your farm to the next generation. So if we take this profitability, sustainability, and enjoyability, we come into this area of sustainability. Now, the difficulty is I've been struggling with this before preparing this presentation, because if we look at what is sustainability, there are so many definitions, and I think that, well, the one which I like the most was is the capacity of our human society to continue indefinitely within Earth's natural cycles. And that's the real word for sustainability, in my opinion. But there are so many definitions. So if you would like me to give you a presentation about how we see that as Lely, well, it's going to be difficult. But let's keep this one as one that we need. Now, the question is, what does that mean for dairy at this point? Now, if you look at this point in the Netherlands, if we look at what is sustainable dairy, you can, for example, look at the initiative which is called Planet Proof. And if you look at their main points, they look at safety for people, pasteurized grazing, biodiversity, which they relate to ammonia emissions, climate, which they relate to CO2 emissions, or I think more methane emissions, but they call it CO2 emissions, and animal welfare and health. But these are only a few concepts which could be related to this main definition that we just gave of sustainability. So you see already it's hard to explain and really pinpoint what is sustainability for farmers. Now, for a lot of people, you saw grazing is a way of sustainability. But if we go back to the first definition, grazing is not by definition related to our definition of saying, well, sustainability is the capacity of a human society to continue indefinitely with Earth's natural cycles. It doesn't relate directly towards grazing. But yet in the Netherlands, we like to see the cows outside, and as Planet Proof, it relates, pasteurized grazing is related towards what we call sustainability. So it's hard to find this definition. Now, this animal welfare thing is in that sense, a lot of times directly related to it. I even looked up the definitions, the themes which are made by the university, your university. If you look at the information, the themes that they address when it comes to sustainability in education, it's a little bit the same. It's a manure policy, biodiversity, greenhouse gases and ammonia, but also permanent grassland. So here you see it get already a little bit more out of the emotion, but it's quite tackled to some issues that are playing right now in society. Now, if we look from a larger scale, and that's the thing, of course, also, if we want to be here on the earth on a sustainable way, we have to look at the issues, how we do that, as were just explained, from Planet Proof or others, but we still have mouths to feed with protein. So we all know there are more people coming, more energy is needed. So in the other way, we have to fulfill this promise too, to ensure that we can continue farming in a sustainable way. So this is the issue what we at Lely are mainly looking at. And that's why our mission is sustainable, enjoyable, profitable, because there, where you take all these three, society, ecology, and economy, and you go to the center, that's the sweet spot. And that's actually, in many definitions, the sweet spot where you find sustainability. Now, that's a nice talk. The first 7 minutes of the presentation is on a sort of holistic view, but how are we doing this at Lely? Well, we are, let's have a look. How can we tick these boxes? So circular farming is one, which comes from the definition that you just saw, the picture you just saw. That's where planet meets profit. well, there's a thing that we say, well, where a profit meets planet is where we give attention to the individual cow. And of course, you might, well, I put a smiley behind profit because, well, if you give good attention to the individual cow, it's good for the cow. But in the end, it's also good for your profit, because a happy cow, a healthy cow, also gives in the end more milk and more profit for the farmer. So we think that's a very important issue. And what we think when it's coming to people and profit, less repetitive work for the farmer. It was one of the challenges I just said for the farmer, is that he has to have a better work-life balance. He has to be sure that he can find the people to work on his farm. Well, that if we see that if you have less repetitive work, this helps for the farmer. And this gives him more time to give more attention to the individual cows. So here we see that if you look at these three things and you pick up these three issues, you might be ticking all the boxes. Now, we as Lely are farming innovators, and the thing that we are good at is robotics and data. I hope you know Lely. I didn't take the time, and I don't want to spend the time to explain what Lely does or what we're here at in the market, but we are the specialists in robotics and data. So we make all sorts of robots, and I will show some in for dairy farmers. Now, so we believe if we want to tick those three boxes, we could and should find a solution for a sustainable future in using robotics and data. And I want to show you how we believe in that. But before I do that, let's go a little bit back, 75 years almost, to where dairy comes from. And this is 75 years because this is Cornelis van der Lely. He's milking one of his cows. It's the guy that started the company Lely. It's a family-owned company, and this guy started with his brother. And you see the guy sitting on a chair milking. But they came up with some ideas, and they started the company in 1948. And this is the time where mechanization really was coming up in dairy. We're coming from the Industrial Revolution, and mechanization was really a thing which really worked good in factories. You can see here Charlie Chaplin in the movie Modern Times. If you standardize everything, so every working procedure, if it's standardized, you can make sure that you can get a lot of efficiency, and also the quality goes up. This whole trend of mechanization worked in a factory, but it worked also, of course, in farming. The world of farming made a huge boost with the introduction of the tractor, as you can see here. And yet, also Lely invented a really beautiful tractor. I must be honest with you, it wasn't a success, but yes, we produced one too. But you saw standardization and efficiency were the things that came with mechanization. Now, what we've seen in that time, as from that time, the number of farmers has gone down and down and down and down. Also because of this mechanization. You could do a lot of large-scale farming with a lot of equipment with only one farmer, instead of, like in the old days, a few farmers. My grandfather had 10 cows. Nowadays, it's 100 cows in the Netherlands. It's so much more the average. So you can see the difference that happened there. Now, the big trend which came after mechanization was robotization. And this is 25 years ago. And for those who are not really familiar with Lely, I have to tell a little bit about this machine you see here. It's an old machine 25 years ago. This is a milking robot. And this was actually the first astronaut, as you see here, a museum piece. For 25 years, we introduced the milking robot. And what you see is not only did it take away all these repetitive movements the farmer had to do, and with mechanization, he bought a milking parlor, but yet in the milking parlor, he had to do a lot of repetitive work. But now all this repetitive work was done by the milking robot. The thing is, however, that this milking robot changed a lot of things. It did not only take away the repetitive work, but in this station, in this robot, each individual cow comes in by herself. So you don't have to do the standardization. Some cows want to be milked 2 times a day. Some cows want to be milked 3 times a day. It's up to her. It's not the standardization that comes from our mechanical processes, but it's looking at the individual of the cow. So introducing the milking robot did not only bring better welfare for the farmer, less repetitive work, but it also gave back the natural habitat for each individual cow. She decided when she wanted to be milked. Now, that's the beauty of robotization. So robotics makes sure that you, by taking away all these repetitive processes, you can also change the whole way of farming towards a more sustainable way of farming. So here in the picture, you see in the back the milking robot, where the cow can enter when she wants, but you also see here in the front a feeding robot. That was one of the next robots we invented. This robot makes sure that there's always feed at the feed alley. And you might say, well, that's good because the farmer doesn't have to do repetitive work. But the beauty is also that good feed at the feed fence is good for the stomach of the cow. So the pH of the stomach of the cow is getting more stable when you're sure that there's always 24/7 feed at the fence. Well, the same goes for the robot in the bottom. You see that is scraping the manure, but by cleaning continuously the floor, you also ensure that this is better for the cow. So it works in a really pretty good way, both ways, for the farmer as well for the well-being of the cow. Well, and that's so this is where mechanical engineering meets your work, the agri science. Robotics puts the cow at the center point by using mechanical engineering. Now, it brings back the freedom and the talent of each cow. And I think that's one of the basics where we really started to roll more towards this sustainability, enjoyable, profitable, and sustainable. Now, if we take this further, we can look at the vision on a farm as we see it right now by Lely. So definitely one thing which is for sure is that we see that it's going to be a fully robotized barn. And I hope I explained to you why, because we believe you can leave the cows more alone by doing this and make sure that you can have all the benefits as explained just previously. But there's more to it. What we also want to have in a future farm is to make sure that all the machines that are running there have 100% uptime. So to make sure that this is a more technical thing. If you have machines, you shouldn't be doing maintenance all the time because, well, then indefinitely you don't have this happy farmer. So you want to make sure that they have uptime all the time. Now, the thing is, if you have managed that, you come to the work of the farmer and then also a little bit more on the well-being of the cows. Because if you can leave the cows alone, you can start doing what we call management by exception. You only give attention to those cows that need attention. Now, how do you do that? Well, the good thing with robotics is that they bring a lot of data. Each cow that is milked brings data with a tag or anything. And this helps you as a farmer to really start with your managing all these data together. There is one thing, however, if you want to have all this data, it's impossible for a farmer to manage this data. Because it's not only the data from the robot, but it's also the price from milk, the weather data, vaccination data for the cows, anything, antibiotics data. What we see is with all this data, that if we put this in a management software system, it helps the farmer to make a better operation. And we've done that. We've introduced this system. And just to show you how it helps the farmer in a profitable way, but also in a sustainable animal welfare way, using the data, you can give advice to the farmer to recognize ketosis. So what we see is, based upon this data, you can give an early warning, like, well, this cow might have ketosis in a way which you see it earlier than when you have to do testing all the time. And we see that 45% can be already detected by using data, which is really much more than at this point can be detected right now. So using all these data algorithms, big data, you can do a lot in our farm of the future. Now, this is more the technical part. I hope it gives you an idea of the robotics and data, where we believe that it really will give a huge difference. But I might be thinking that you say, well, we went to the definition, planet-proof emissions. How is it happening? Well, the one last thing that we're looking at is this circular farm. And we are at this point looking at bringing back circularity on farm level. So making sure that all the nutrients in the farm that you can see here, so the kalium and the phosphate and the nitrogen, is brought back to the land. If you can do this in a precise way, this brings you a very profitable use of the manure. And at the same point, if you can do it in the right way, you can reduce emissions. Well, I only got half an hour to talk to you because I want to give some time for Jannet too. But if you want to know how we do this, we came with an invention, and it's called the Lely sphere. And the Lely sphere has a system where we separate the manure and the urine on the barn floor level. And what you see is the urine is going into the cellar, and what we see is that the manure is collected by a little robot, which you can see here in the picture, the manure scraper robot. Now, the last thing is the emissions which you get, so the ammonia emissions, they are sucked up by a system which you can see here. Through the barn floor, they sucked up and they are processed up until fertilizer. So in a very perfect way, we separate kalium, phosphate, and nitrogen, which you can then bring back to the land in a precise way, making sure that you make much more use in a circular way of your nutrients. So this is already looking at Planet Proof and all the ambitions we saw in, like the verb says, this system should be helping there. So not only the animal welfare, but also a technical system to make sure that you get there. So we believe in the future farm, every farm that has its own pasture could be using this system. Well, here you see the components that we separate. We have measured, and we can make sure that we have at least 70% reduction of ammonia emissions in the barn, which is huge. It's in the Netherlands a huge problem, these ammonia emissions. But if you use a system like this, it can reduce it already with 70%. But the benefit is not so much only ammonia emissions, but really the vision of bringing all the nutrients back to the land where you want to use it. So a circular way of farming. Now, the second thing of a circular way of farming is not only getting the manure and bringing it to the land, but we also believe that there's improvement to make when you look in bringing this cycle back. So nowadays, if you harvest grass, you a lot of times ensilage that, waiting for summer to give it, for winter to give it to the cows. But a lot of times, cows in the barn, if they could be fed with fresh grass, you are sure that you get the most out of the nutrients that you have in your grass at that stage. But it's labor intensive, again, repetitive work. And you don't want to have this repetitive work to make sure that they get fresh grass in the barn. Also, again, for this, we made an innovation. So fresh grass outside, but also for inside. And therefore, we have introduced a robot. Again, of course, we are farming innovators. So again, we introduced a robot. And this one is called the Lely Exos. And actually, it's an unmanned vehicle. And it drives around in the field. And it brings fresh grass every time to the barn to make sure that the cows can be fed with fresh grass. And imagine it gives a lot of extra proteins for the cows, a lot of extra sugars. So it's really good for them. And it makes sure that you really take the best advantage of your grassland. So here you see some guy doing maintenance on this robot. It drives around, drives back to the barn, and then there throws it next to the feed fence, where in combination with a Lely vector, they can ensure that the right feed is given to the cows. Now, this is the way where we try to tick the box. First of all, enjoyability, the robotics, and the cow welfare. We said, well, the circular way of farming, 2 new innovations. And the last one, of course, I want to show you too, because that's the one where I'm responsible for at Lely, is processing on the farm. You might say, well, why is that sustainable? Well, in 2 ways. What we see is that consumers are getting more and more critical on what dairy farmers do. And we believe that if you bring consumer and dairy farmer closer to each other, if you close that gap, there will be more understanding. But secondly of all, what we also believe is that if a farmer could start processing on his farm themselves, more value is kept on the farm. So you give the farmer an opportunity to create a more and honest living. So the profitability in a sustainable way will increase. Well, that's why Lely came on the market with a milking factory where you don't have this standardization or blending as you see in a normal milking factory, where all the farmers bring their milk together into one blend. No, we created a very small milking factory that you put on the farm. It can bring the milk direct to the consumer, and it also makes sure that you really taste the milk of this individual farmer. And we can go further even of this individual cow. We can select it and put it in a bottle of that in that sense. So all these inventions are therefore made to make sure that a farmer can create a enjoyable, sustainable, and profitable way of farming. So this is how it looks all together in one, well, picture. I hope you can see it here. There's this farmer giving attention to his individual cow, made possible by all the data and all the robotics. He has an enjoyable life because, well, the robots take over the repetitive work, and he can really look at his craftsmanship and looking at animals, looking at his field and how to manage that. He is supported on his decisions, so he doesn't get crazy of all the data. And in the second sense, he is able to really start to close the cycle around his farm with the nutrients, as well as with bringing those nutrients back from the grassland in a fresh way. So this is how we look at the future in farming and how we as Lely are working towards it. And as you saw in yellow, you see some of these innovations. So they're made yellow because, well, we've launched them, but they're not yet available on the market. But, well, in the coming 5 to 10 years, rest assured, we will be doing our best to do so. So we are really going for a innovation, keep on innovating for the sustainable future. I hope you just got an impression how we as Lely look at this future in dairy farming and what we do to create this. But there's one thing, and that's the last 15 minutes of our presentation. Innovation has to continue. And there are still a lot of challenges. You saw the challenge of the farmer to ensure when society changes that the farmer can cope with that. And we as Lely believe it's our duty to fulfill that. Now, how we do that, for that part, I would like to give the word to Jannet at this point.
Yes, thank you, Sergio. I think if you've never been on a farm before, this is the first time you see the dairy farm, it might be a lot of information. I think there's a lot happening. So I would like to tell you more about, indeed, the how. How are we going to innovate? So a bit about myself. This is me in a barn. I do this every month, even though I'm a neuropsychologist by background. But I really enjoy being with the customer, right? Because in the end of the day, it's about our farmer and the cows. How can we help him be a better farmer? So before that, I actually, and I still live in Wageningen, but I worked at Start Hub. I set it up in 2014 and worked there and at Start Life for more than 5 years. And then last year in 2020, I joined Lely, and I'm responsible for the startups that we have at Lely. So innovation, we're talking about it a lot, and you've seen that it's in our DNA. But for us, innovation is never about a goal on its own, right? It's not about the innovation. It is about what it accomplished. What can you do with it? And I think this is why Lely is such a really cool company to work with, because there's a lot of impact to gain when you're working with farmers. If you look at these 17 goals, I think there are many that Lely is touching upon. So I will not go into detail of each one, but I think there's a lot to gain in the dairy sector. So as Sergio also mentioned, I think this is what is sustainability, right? And I remember also when working at Startup that we got the question a lot: what is sustainability and how do you achieve it? And also I see this, that the only way to achieve it is to get those people, planet, and profit together. And if you have that combination, is really how you create lasting impact, because that's what it's all about, right? That's what makes life interesting, to really build impact, to make the world a bit better every day. So the question of Sergio, how are we doing that? So maybe just start with, in general, how can startups and corporates like Lely work together? Because I think it's not just for Lely, but I think if I look at the student challenges, I saw a lot of cool initiative, I saw a lot of creativity, and you have something to offer for corporates. And it goes both ways. So as you can see here, corporates and startups, they have their own strength, right? Different way of working, different qualities. And I think the true power is in matching those. So when you have the disruptive ideas from a startup and you combine that in an organization such as Lely, that is already well set, that has a presence in over 45 countries, then you can really build something together. So when I'm working with startups, I always look at, okay, how can we build something together? Because I think this is how we move forward, right? In really finding solutions together and looking to each qualities and see how we can match. And this is also something I noticed from our startups in working with us, that having corporate startup engagement is really a benefit for both parties. So why are we working with startups? Because in the end of the day, we really want to build on that farm of the future, and we really want to make sure that farming becomes more sustainable, enjoyable, and profitable. So how does innovation look like, startup innovation at an organization such as Lely? So we have three departments, basically. So the first one is technology. And maybe you've heard of the sandbox of Google, where you have a lot of creative souls and engineers together in one building. It's basically separate also from the main building. And when you go there, you will see a lot of different stuff that you wouldn't see at a normal office, right? It's really a creative environment. And this is where the new innovations are coming from, such as the manure processor and the mowing machine, the automated mowing machine. They come from technology, so they are developed here. And then we have our second part where we do innovation, and that's product development. And what they do is they make sure that the new products that coming from technologies are ready to go into market, but they also make sure that the products, the machines that we have, the solutions that we have, stay up to date, and that we use the latest equipment, the latest technology. So those two departments are really strong drivers of innovation, and now we have also startups being a third pillar in this innovation and driving innovation. So, and it can be that I'm looking at startups that could support product development, for example, or that I'm working on a solution together with technologies. But also startups can sometimes help, for example, with HR or logistics or marketing. So in general, I'm working, of course, with solutions that are really there for the farmer. But this is the cool thing with startups. The amount of possibilities are enormous. So how do we work with startups, right? I mentioned before we can work sometimes with product development or technologies in a direct combination. So we have a portfolio of startups that we have invested in. So sometimes we take a minority share in order to coach a startup, to support them in the process, also financially. And in return, they bring a solution to the market that's beneficial also for our customers. So to give you two examples, one is Vojan. It's a startup based in Germany, and what they do is, you can see Karsten holding an iPad. It's a tool, management software that will support farmers in better understanding and better adjusting the feed ration. as Sergio mentioned, it's really important, of course, for the cow to have the right feed in front of the fence. It's like, I think it's one of the most important things that there is, to give the cows the right ration. And maybe you heard about it, but even with feed, you can also lower, for example, ammonia. You can make sure that cows are better, have a better health, or, for example, have more protein in their milk. So with their tool, you better understand, what am I feeding to the cows, and how can I adjust to ensure every cow has the right feed in front of the fence. And so you can see that they have an app, and we're having this platform, also an app basically, in which you can get, for example, full John in, and you can use that app and combine the data that you have from the astronaut. So you know what kind of milk the cow is giving, or you know from the vector how much feed is given in the last 24 hours. So if you combine that, of course, that's the new oil, right? It's the most valuable thing is data. So then we have another one. Actually, Amra is also present today. So thank you for joining us, Amra. It's a startup we haven't invested in, but we met each other at a challenge that we did 2 years ago, which I will show you a movie about a bit later. But this is how we got to know Synomis. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, apparently, but I cannot speak Italian, so pardon me, Amra. It's a startup that has climate boxes. So if you look at the top left next to the word Synomis, you will see 2 small boxes, and they measure 20 parameters, such as ammonia, temperature, light, noise, carbon dioxide. They can measure a lot of elements in the barn. And by this, a farmer can better adjust what he's doing with the barn environment, or he can, for example, use this to better understand how the manure processor, the Lely sphere, is working. So these are really cool combinations of our product together with a product of a startups that are strong and really give their value to the farmer. So as I mentioned, we met Amra at a challenge that we did in 2019, and we're currently doing this event again. So in case, actually the deadline was the 15th of May, so last Friday. But if there are any of you has a startup and think this is really the right match, then please contact me directly, because tomorrow we're finalizing up the application. So if you think that you should really be joining this event, then let me know. But I want to give you a small video about the event that we will be doing this year. Movie time. By sustaining a focus on the future of farming, Lely became the world leader in dairy robotics and farm management. To remain the world leader, Lely collaborates with startups that have new solutions and ideas to revolutionize the dairy industry. That's why we have our Feed the Future challenge. Feed the Future is an initiative by Lely, supported by Rockstar, to call out on all startups to help us find solutions for the dairy industry. We will pick 5 startups to join our 4-week program, in which they will get market insights, startup skills, and join Lely's larger network.
The Feed the Future Challenge is a great opportunity for startups to grow their business and a chance to pilot with Lely. We are looking for startups that address the following: farm animal welfare, pioneering enhancement of machinery, sustainable and efficient production, and improved information access. As a startup, you must have some proof of concept, but need support to go to market.
Currently, we're working with several different startups, and we make sure that they get access to all the facilities they need, such as experts, data, and research.
Every pilot is tailored, as it is important that we're there through it all. We see this as a true collaboration where we can both learn from each other. So do not hesitate and apply now.
Yes, thank you. So this is one of the ways in which we collaborate. I think I can get my presentation back. Yes, thank you. So there are many ways in which we innovate and we work with startups. And the end of the day, let's. Oh, I can see my my camera is on the right. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so let's make farming more enjoyable, profitable, and sustainable together. Thank you for listening and being with us. I think Sergio and me are really excited to hear your questions and to start talking about what keeps you busy as well.
Thanks a lot, Jannet. Thanks, Sergio. There are quite a lot of questions, actually. But
Good.
before we go into the questions from the viewers, actually, I was really inspired by this picture of the completely robotized farm where you have all those machines. So I was very curious, do they already exist? Or is it like it's a future?
Well, to answer your question, yes, they all exist. The picture that you saw is only the yellow ones are introduced recently and are not available on the market, but all the other robots are are already available and making a lot of farmers happy at this point. Yes, so it's closer than you think.
Okay, and what do the farmers do then all day?
Sorry.
What do the farmers do all day?
No, I saw one of the questions, like, is it possible to have, or is it your ambition to have a sort of robotized barn where you don't need a farmer? But I think the practice and the experience and the knowledge of the farmer is key. And there are still a lot of things which have to be done manually. But what these robots do, they give the farmer more time to spend time with the cows. And in the end, that's the relationship between cow and farmer. That's a lot of things where it's about. So take away all these repetitive tasks, and then he still has a very busy day. But I hope for an enjoyable day.
Yeah, it's a very inspiring vision. So let me start with a question from Mareva. I'm going to broadcast it. So she was actually like also inspired by this vision, but also
machine and which fulfills a small part in the dairy needing market, and yet it can be an extra for a farmer, or it can fully work with an orbiter. The orbiters now in the market really take away more than half of the production of a farm, but it's not our vision that in the future all farmers will be needing a orbiter. And I think the right balance between what these factories do and what we can offer with an orbiter will be the future we're looking at. So it's the efficiency of a factory towards the special direct value chain that an orbiter offers, which is another need for the consumer.
Okay, thanks. So then coming back on the question from Tonke, will it be possible to completely run a farm with robotics in the future? You still think that there's space for the farmer experience, right?
Yeah, it should be. It's there. It's well, maybe Jannet, when there will be startups doing it all together, but robotics are not there to replace anything or as such. It's changing the balance on the farm. And there are a lot of things where you still, and mainly the knowledge and craftsmanship of a farmer, that you will still be needing. And well, personally, to be honest, I'm glad that farmers are still needed for that.
Yeah, but when you think about innovation, because you are still looking for startups to work with you, what kind of innovations, what are the new trends you are looking into actually at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are so many trends. It's hard to sometimes focus or to decide on which one. Of course, we're working hard with the Lely sphere, so to get more in the manure. We also think that especially mine carbon and put it into resource, because actually it is for the greenhouses, for example. It can help also greenhouses heat up. So if you're looking at those kind of alternatives, I think this is really cool, right? Because there's a lot of waste streams that are on a farm that we can really use.
And the cow is always central in your solutions, or can you also imagine like robotics, but then without cow? So like for farming, for producing, I don't know, insect meal or milk. Is it also a field you would like to explore?
Now, well, maybe even to say, you can use, for example, the vector robot for goats if you would like, but that's not what we want, because if you are specialized in dairy, you keep your specialization, and that what makes, well, it makes you better all the time. So we really focus on dairy at this point. But I can imagine working with startups, a lot of things that we invent were used in a different industry by license. So you can imagine if you fuel up a plane in the air, a starfighter, if you fuel it up, the connection is similar to a connection of a tractor with a manure machine. Now, this connection was invented by Lely, then licensed, and is now used by the Air Force. So we have a lot of licenses running like that. Even the small mouse on your computer in the center of your keyboard is a Lely invention, which is licensed to other people. So, but our focus will be there.
Okay.
I guess, Jannet?
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? I think we should, and this is the fun thing, right? Is that we are not restricted to dairy or agro. It's we really have to look outside and then take advantage of those technologies developed.
Yes, clear. Thanks a lot. So then, if we follow this line of thinking, we have a question from Alessandro, and he's actually asking, do you think new technologies are compatible and could provide benefits to alternative farming practices such as agroecology and agroforestry?
Would you like to pick this one, or shall I, Jannet?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Well, personally, what you can see is, of course, that, as I just said, we invent for our customers, which is the dairy market, but the technologies that it creates will for sure be valuable for a lot of other markets, and even agroforestry, which I privately, personally find really amazing, and a thing which is really beautiful to see. It's not going to be something we will dedicate ourselves to, but the technology that we deliver can be used in that sense, I believe, in the future too. So that will be my answer. Not for Lely, but yes, the technology, and that's the question, will provide a lot of solutions.
Okay, clear. So now I would like to switch the gears. There are quite some questions about the data, actually. And to start with is the question, how does Lely provide I will broadcast this question. How does Lely provide free flow of data from any source to any device? Because you talked a lot about this data in your presentation.
Sergio, take it on.
To be honest, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I should be able to answer this question, but practically how we do that in the back end, I don't know. We have this data warehouse, and I saw a beautiful question also about the energy of a data warehouse. I guess we come back to that later. But the thing is, how we provide it is also a question of how we treat data, who owns the data.
Yeah.
And I think that's and that's a very important thing. We at Lely, we think the farmer, at that sense, owns the data. But let's be honest, for a farmer, what is data? A farmer doesn't want to have data, he wants to have information. Or as I explained, he wants to be able to ensure that it can be used for other practices, because the combination of Lely data and other data will give him more information. But this is a choice made by the farmer. And of course, it's good for us if we can use it to improve our products. But in the end, data is there for sure to also help the farmer themselves. But we have to ask their permission, and it's their data.
Yeah, and we're working, because I'm not a techie either, but I know that, for example, with Fodjan, which is also a data startup, we're working in a sort of free format where they can test their solution and see how it interacts with other data that we have and see how it works on the platform. But in the end of the day, the data is from the farmer. Yeah.
So let's follow up with this question about the energy. I will broadcast it. So do you think that the benefits of using information from data collected from robots outweigh the environmental costs of collecting and storing this data?
That's a good question. Personally, well, I haven't heard a study about it yet, but personally, I believe so much in the benefits that I think for sure it outweighs. But recently I was driving past a data center and I saw this huge energy consuming data center. And then I can imagine this question. But for as far as I know it now, it fully outweighs. There are so many big benefits for the farmer, but also on the impact on the nutrient cycles, etc. And yes, energy use is one of the things. But in my personal belief, and I'm saying this, there's no study, it weighs definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, we should measure it. I think we could even measure it. And
I think it's a good question.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And for example, with Vojan, it demands, of course, calculation power and understanding the feed. But if you see how much, of course, feed is also a valuable resource. So
not mining Bitcoin, so that's good.
It's a side branch. Okay. Great. The time is almost up, so I would like to wrap up with the last question. The topic of this webinar is sustainable farming. So we talked, Sergio, you talked about this orbiter. Is milk produced in orbiter factory actually sustainable?
That's a good question. To be honest with you, looking at the presentation and looking at the definitions of sustainability, claiming it is so much sustainable is not something I would like to do at this point. But what I do believe is, looking at what we're aiming at, is giving the farmer a opportunity to really directly give milk to the consumer. It's also giving the farmer an opportunity to earn a honest living, and it's linked to all the honest, the solutions that we produce at Lely. So a good question, but I'll leave it up to the consumer and to the public to judge if that's sustainability.
Okay, great. Yes, thanks a lot for your answer. So Sergio, Jannet, thanks a lot for your presentation. It was really inspiring. I really enjoyed it. I hope to see you again at the announcement of the finalists on the 3rd of June. Also, everybody who is watching this webinar, you are mostly welcome to join the event. The link has been put in the chat. If you want to watch back the webinar, we will send you the replay